September 1944. High above the jungles of Borneo, the thin silver shape of a P-38 Lightning cut through humid air like a blade. Inside the cockpit sat Major Richard Ira Bong, 23 years old, calm and focused. The twin Allison engines purred behind him with a combined 3,000 horsepower. Every vibration of the machine felt alive through the controls in his hands. Far below, sunlight glinted off the wings of Japanese fighters as they clawed their way upward toward a formation of American B-24 Liberators. They were too late. They had no idea that one of the deadliest pilots in the Pacific already had them framed in his gun sight. Bong eased the nose of the Lightning down. His thumb rested lightly on the trigger. His breathing was steady. The distance closed quickly, from 2,000 meters to 500. He pressed the trigger for less than a second. Tracers reached out in a white streak. One of the Japanese fighters blossomed into flame and tumbled into the jungle canopy below. That attack was only one of many. By the end of the war, Richard Bong would destroy 40 enemy aircraft, more than any other American pilot in history. His record still stands. But what made Bong extraordinary was not aggression or recklessness. It was precision, calm under fire, the discipline to wait for the perfect moment before pulling the trigger. This is his story. The story of a soft-spoken farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, who rose from obscurity to become America's ace of aces. A story of instinct, patience, and the mastery of one of the most unusual fighter planes ever built. Richard Ira Bong grew up in northern Wisconsin, the eldest of 9 children. The landscape was quiet, filled with open fields and pine forests. As a boy, he spent hours watching barn swallows dart above the grass. His fascination with flight began there, in the slow rhythm of farm life, where imagination was often the only adventure available. When he joined the Army Air Corps in 1941, he was not a natural warrior. In training, he was cheerful, easygoing, and deeply curious about machines. He studied diagrams more than combat theory. Instructors noticed his hands steady, delicate, precise, and his coordination, which was remarkable. Yet Bong's early career almost ended before it began. At Hamilton Field in California, he performed low-altitude rolls and passes over San Francisco, flying so close to rooftops that laundry fluttered in his prop wash. It was daring but reckless, and it broke every regulation in the book. His commanding officers were furious. Some demanded that he be grounded permanently. But General George Kenney, one of the most perceptive leaders in the Pacific Theater, saw something others missed. Kenney watched Bong's training films and noted the same pattern over and over: flawless control, exact timing, almost artistic smoothness in flight. "He flies as if he were born with wings," the general remarked. Instead of ending Bong's career, Kenney ordered extra training. "Let him learn discipline," he said, "and then give him a chance to fight." That decision changed history. By late 1942, Bong was assigned to the 9th Fighter Squadron of the 49th Group, heading to New Guinea under the 5th Air Force. The air war in the Pacific was brutal. Japanese pilots had years of experience from campaigns over China and the Philippines. They were confident and fearless. For Bong and his squadron, it was baptism by fire. The terrain below was dense jungle, stretching endlessly to the sea. Tropical storms rolled through daily. When the call came to intercept enemy bombers over Buna, Bong climbed his P-38 through heavy clouds, heart racing. Ahead, black dots grew larger Japanese G-4M Betty bombers guarded by agile A-6M0s. The P-38 Lightning was unlike anything else in the sky. Designed by Lockheed engineer Clarence Kelly Johnson, it carried twin booms for the engines, a central cockpit pod, tricycle landing gear, and a powerful array of guns in the nose: 4.50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon. It was fast and stable, capable of more than 400 miles per hour in altitudes above 40,000 feet. But it was not nimble. The Zero could turn inside the Lightning with ease. Dogfights at low speed favored the Japanese. Bong adapted instantly. He refused to turn with the enemy. Instead, he climbed high above them, waited and dove with speed and surprise. The P-38's guns fired in a single converging stream. When he hit, the effect was catastrophic. His early combat reports were brief, written in neat handwriting. Altitude 12,000. Fired one burst. Enemy destroyed. No drama, no exaggeration, only results. Those first missions taught him a rule that would define his career. Use altitude, use speed, and make every shot count. The P-38 was both a marvel and a menace. Its twin engines offered power and safety. One could keep the aircraft flying if the other failed, but they also introduced complex aerodynamics. Compressibility in steep dives could lock the controls. Inexperienced pilots who did not understand this physics often never returned. Bong studied the Lightning's behavior obsessively. He experimented in training flights, pushing the aircraft to its limits, learning where the controls stiffened, how the nose would drop when the air thickened, how to recover at the edge of disaster. He discovered that small, measured control inputs worked best. Smooth flying saved lives. His fellow pilots admired his accuracy. While most fired long bursts that wasted ammunition, Bong waited until he was close enough to see the enemy pilot's canopy. Then he pressed the trigger for half a second. One short burst. One kill. Major Thomas Lynch, his squadron mate, described Bong's attacks as surgical. He stalked his prey with patience, positioning perfectly before firing. His deflection shooting predicting where the enemy would be, not where it was instinctive, almost mathematical. By mid-1943, Bong had earned several confirmed victories. The squadron began painting the name Marge beneath the canopy of his aircraft after his girlfriend back home. He became one of the most recognizable fighters in the Pacific. July 1943. Above Lee, New Guinea, Japanese bombers approached Allied positions. Bong led a section of P-38S into a climb through scattered clouds. He spotted the enemy below, lined up perfectly between sun and target. "Attack from above," he told his wingman over the radio. "They will never see us." He rolled the Lightning onto its back and dove. The air screamed across the wings. Within seconds, the lead bomber filled his gun sight. A brief flash of fire erupted from his nose guns. The bomber broke apart, wings shearing off as fuel tanks ignited. Bong climbed again, circled and dived once more. 2 more bombers fell. Then he was gone, climbing back into the clouds before the escorts could respond. This was how he fought: strike fast, strike clean, and disappear. Each mission refined his method. Altitude advantage, surprise, speed, precision, no waste, no chaos. By November 1943, Bong had 21 confirmed victories. He was brought home for a war bond tour, smiling modestly at crowds that called him a hero. But he was restless. "I belong out there," he told a friend. "That's where my job is." March 1944. After months of ceremonies and interviews, Richard Bong finally returned to where he belonged in the cockpit. The Pacific War had moved north toward the Philippines and Borneo, and the 5th Air Force needed its best pilots back in the fight. Bong now flew an upgraded P-38J Lightning. The new model had better engines, improved cockpit heating, and hydraulically boosted ailerons that allowed faster, sharper rolls at high speed. The aircraft was faster, stronger, and deadlier than ever before. He arrived back at a time when the balance of air power was shifting. Japan's once formidable air force was beginning to fracture. Years of attrition and dwindling resources meant that their new pilots had far less training than before. The advantage was slipping away, and Bong knew it. But he also knew that even a single mistake in combat could still mean death. He studied enemy tactics, memorized the patterns of their formations, and trained new pilots personally. His lessons were simple: maintain altitude, stay fast, and never turn with the enemy. By April 1944, Bong was leading missions over Hollandia, providing escort for bombers heading toward heavily defended Japanese bases. On one mission, intelligence warned of large enemy fighter concentrations. Bong's formation climbed high into thin air. The sun was at their backs, giving them the element of surprise. As the Japanese fighters rose to attack the bombers, Bong's section dove like a hammer from the sky. The P-38s tore through the enemy formation, firing short bursts. Within seconds, several enemy aircraft exploded. Bong scored 2 more confirmed kills that day. His men returned home safely. His after-action report, as always, was understated. Engaged enemy at altitude. Fired 2 bursts. 2 aircraft destroyed. By the summer of 1944, Bong's reputation had spread across the Pacific. Every pilot knew his name. Some tried to copy his tactics, but few could match his accuracy. Bong's success was not luck. It was method. He fought with a precision that bordered on science. He always began by climbing to maximum altitude, staying above the enemy until the perfect opportunity appeared. Then he dove with immense speed, firing a short, controlled burst when the target filled his sight. Afterward, he disengaged immediately, climbing back to safety to prepare for another pass. Each engagement was short, violent, and decisive. He never chased kills recklessly. He avoided wasteful dogfights. His focus was always on the mission, protecting bombers and maintaining control of the skies. His fellow pilots noticed something else: Bong's ability to keep calm. Even under fire, his voice on the radio was level and clear. When others panicked, he remained analytical, adjusting his position with subtle control inputs, never jerking the stick, never rushing a decision. In one report, his commanding officer wrote, "Major Bong fights as if time obeys him." By June 1944, he had achieved 28 confirmed victories, surpassing the record of World War I ace Eddie Rickenbacker. It made headlines back home. Reporters called him America's ace of aces. When General George Kenney heard the news, he immediately sent orders. Bong was to be pulled from combat. "We can't afford to lose him," Kenney said. But Bong refused to stop. "Sir," he replied, "as long as my men are flying, I will fly too." Kenney relented but placed limits on his missions. Bong would lead only selected operations, flying with experienced pilots for cover. It did not slow him down. October 1944. The oil fields of Balikpapan, Borneo, one of Japan's last remaining fuel sources. American bombers were ordered to destroy them. Japanese command scrambled everything it had left to defend the skies. Bong led the escort group that morning. His P-38, marked Marge for the woman waiting for him in Wisconsin, glinted silver in the sun. They climbed high into thin air as dark specks appeared far below. Dozens of Japanese fighters were forming up. Bong positioned his formation between the sun and the enemy, an old trick that turned light into a weapon. "Hold position," he told his men. "Wait until they commit." When the Japanese dove toward the bombers, Bong struck from above. His guns roared for less than a second. One Zero burst into flames. Another followed. Then the sky became chaos, smoke, traces, and spiraling contrails. In the middle of the fight, Bong's left engine took a hit. Flames licked at the nacelle. Most pilots would have bailed out. Bong did not. He shut the damaged engine down, feathered the propeller, and continued fighting on one engine. Even with half his power, he still scored another kill before limping home. When he landed, mechanics counted bullet holes across both wings. The aircraft should not have survived, but Bong had brought it back. By December 1944, Bong's victory count reached 40. Each one confirmed, each one witnessed. No American pilot had ever come close to such a total. General MacArthur ordered him grounded permanently. "Major Bong has done enough for his country," the statement read. "His value now lies in teaching others." For Bong, it was bittersweet. He was proud of his record, but uneasy about fame. "There are hundreds of pilots out there doing the same job," he told a reporter. "I just happened to get lucky." He returned home a hero. President Roosevelt awarded him the Medal of Honor. Crowds cheered his name. Yet the quiet young man from Wisconsin never quite felt comfortable with attention. He wrote letters to Marge from military hospitals and air bases, describing his longing for home and peace. "I think often about the boys still out there," he wrote. "Flying missions, doing their jobs. I wish I could be with them again." August 6, 1945. Burbank, California. Lockheed Air Terminal. The war was nearly over. Bong, newly married to Marge, had begun a new chapter as a test pilot for Lockheed. His new aircraft was unlike anything he had ever flown, the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. It was the future of aviation, sleek, fast, and powered by a single turbojet engine capable of 500 miles per hour. Bong was among the first men trusted to fly it. That morning, the air shimmered in the California heat as he took off for a test flight. Minutes later, tragedy struck. The fuel pump failed shortly after takeoff. The engine died. Bong tried to restart it, but the aircraft lost altitude rapidly. He aimed for an open field, hoping to glide to safety. At the last moment, he attempted to eject, but the altitude was too low. The jet crashed near Van Nuys Boulevard. Major Richard Ira Bong, America's greatest fighter pilot, was gone. He was 24 years old. That same day, half a world away, the Enola Gay dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The headlines that followed overshadowed Bong's death almost entirely. His passing became a small note beneath the dawn of the nuclear age. But among pilots, his name would never be forgotten. Today, Richard Bong's record of 40 confirmed victories still stands. It will likely never be broken. Modern air combat, driven by radar and long-range missiles, no longer allows for the close, personal battles that defined his era. Bong's genius lay not in aggression, but in precision. He fought with patience, understanding that control and discipline win more battles than anger ever could. His tactical reports became part of official Air Force training. His techniques for deflection shooting, altitude advantage, and burst control were taught to generations of fighter pilots. At the Bong Veterans Historical Center in Superior, Wisconsin, his story is preserved. His Medal of Honor gleams beneath glass. His flight logs, written in tidy script, list 200 combat missions. Outside the museum, a restored P-38 bearing the name Marge stands as a tribute to the young man who mastered it. General George Kenney, the same officer who once reprimanded him for reckless flying, later wrote, "Bong was the finest pilot I ever saw. His calmness under pressure and his precision in combat were unmatched. He made aerial warfare look effortless." The fields where Bong learned to fly are quiet again. The jungles of New Guinea have reclaimed the wreckage of war. But high above those green canopies where sunlight meets sky, his story still echoes the story of a boy who learned to fly and became a legend through patience, humility, and perfect aim. The California sun was blinding that morning. Heat shimmered off the runways of the Lockheed Air Terminal in Burbank, where a group of engineers gathered beside a strange new machine. It was sleek and metallic, with thin swept wings and a long pointed nose. Its engine, buried deep within the fuselage, produced no propeller noise at all. When it started, it howled like a living thing. The aircraft was called the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. It was the dawn of a new age, and at the center of it stood Major Richard Ira Bong. He had been handpicked by Lockheed and the Army Air Forces to help test the aircraft that would replace everything he had known. The world of piston engines, propellers, and dogfights was ending. The jet age had arrived, and Bong, now 24 years old, was among the first to step into it. He was no longer the young farm boy from Wisconsin who had nearly lost his career for reckless stunts over San Francisco. He was a national hero, holder of the Medal of Honor, and a living symbol of the American Air War. Yet in person he was still humble. Friends described him as quiet, polite, and almost shy when speaking about his achievements. What he loved most, even now, was the feeling of flight, the silent weight of the aircraft in his hands, the sound of air tearing past the canopy, the moment of total focus when man and machine became one. That morning, Bong climbed into the cockpit of the P-80, sealed the canopy, and taxied toward the runway. The ground crew gave a thumbs up. The jet accelerated quickly, leaving a faint trail of smoke behind it. In seconds, it lifted off, rising into the blue California sky. No one knew that this would be his final flight. Moments later, the engine failed. Investigators would later determine that a fuel pump malfunction had starved the jet of power. Bong tried to restart the engine, but the altitude was too low. The aircraft lost speed and began to fall. He aimed for an open field, fighting to keep control. At the last instant, he tried to eject, but there was not enough height. The impact came less than a mile from the airfield. The explosion was seen for miles. Richard Bong, America's greatest fighter pilot, died instantly. It was August 6, 1945, the same day, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The world was entering a new era of warfare, one where dogfights would be replaced by technology so advanced that human skill would never again decide battles in the same way. The headlines that evening were dominated by one story, the atomic bomb. A single weapon destroys an entire city, read the newspapers. For the first time in history, mankind had seen the true scale of technological power. The death of Major Bong was printed beneath those headlines in small letters. His story, once front-page news, had been overshadowed by the dawn of the nuclear age. In Poplar, Wisconsin, the Bong family received the telegram in silence. His parents wept quietly. The neighbors came to the house, leaving flowers and notes on the porch. The entire town mourned the boy who had once helped milk cows at sunrise, and now stood as one of America's immortal heroes. The people who knew him remembered his kindness more than his victories. They remembered his smile, his calm voice, his unshakable composure. His pastor said during the memorial, "He never glorified war, he glorified excellence." Richard Bong's record remains untouched. 40 confirmed victories, 200 combat missions. Not once was he shot down. He was not a man of bravado. He never boasted about his kills. In every letter to his fiancée Marge, he downplayed his achievements. "I just do my job," he wrote. "I fly. I protect. I come home." But behind that humility was a man who had understood something deeper than tactics. He had understood discipline, the idea that skill is not about aggression, but about control. Bong was never the fastest to draw, nor the most daring. He was the most patient. He waited for perfect alignment before firing, trusting his instincts and the geometry of motion. His success was a triumph of calm thought over impulse. In this, he embodied the transformation of American aviation itself. The early years of the war had been defined by chaos pilots learning as they fought, improvising tactics in desperate conditions. By 1945, that chaos had become precision, an art guided by experience and intelligence. Bong was its symbol. After his death, the US Air Force studied his combat reports and gun camera footage. His patterns became doctrine. Training manuals cited his deflection shooting techniques. Flight instructors taught new cadets the principle that Bong had lived by: speed, patience, precision. Even today, pilots are told the same truth: victory in the air is not about emotion, but about composure. Far from the Pacific battlefields and the deserts of California, the landscape of northern Wisconsin remains quiet. The Bong family farm still stands, its fields stretching out beneath a sky that seems endless. The people of Poplar keep his memory alive in simple ways: a small museum, a statue near the highway, and stories told to schoolchildren about the boy who learned to fly above these very woods. The Richard Ira Bong Veterans Historical Center in Superior, Wisconsin, holds his medals, photographs, and handwritten mission logs. In a large hangar nearby sits a restored P-38 Lightning, painted silver with the name Marge across its nose. It gleams under soft lights like a ghost from another time. Visitors often stop in front of it and stare, imagining the young pilot who once sat behind that canopy, 20 years old, flying into storms and battlefields halfway across the world. The aircraft is silent now, but its shape still carries the energy of those years, a monument to courage balanced by discipline. School groups tour the museum every summer. Guides tell the story of how Bong once buzzed the Golden Gate Bridge in his P-38, how he learned from punishment instead of being broken by it, how he used the lessons of restraint to become the most lethal precision pilot in the Pacific. For those who listen closely, the story is more than history. It is a lesson about growth, humility, and mastery. By the 1950s, the jet age that Bong had helped usher in had completely transformed warfare. Fighter pilots no longer met face to face. Missiles replaced machine guns. Air battles happened at speeds and distances unimaginable in his time. Yet in every new aircraft, from the F-86 Sabre to the modern F-22 Raptor, the principles he lived by endure. The pilot still must calculate, anticipate, and decide in fractions of a second. The machine may be faster, but the mind behind it still wins the fight. Every generation of pilots who trained after the war heard his name. They saw his record in the manuals and the museum plaques and understood that the essence of mastery had not changed. In the Vietnam War, American pilots who achieved ace status often cited Bong as their childhood inspiration. In the Persian Gulf, instructors at Nellis Air Force Base taught his tactical approach as part of heritage lessons. In modern drone operations, commanders still quote Bong's philosophy: precision before passion. His legacy became not just about flying, but about the human approach to perfection. Many who study Bong's record are struck by how ordinary he appeared. He was not loud, not arrogant, not the typical image of a warrior. He laughed easily and preferred small talk about weather and home rather than medals and victories. He disliked interviews, rarely spoke of combat, and never tried to market himself. When reporters asked about his secret, he said simply, "I aim carefully." That modesty made him something greater than a hero. It made him relatable. He was the image of quiet competence, of a man who mastered his craft without seeking glory. Psychologists studying combat behavior have often cited Bong's composure as the ideal state of mind under stress, the ability to operate in what they call the flow state, where instinct and logic merge perfectly. He reached that state almost every time he flew. His friend and fellow ace, Major Thomas Lynch, once said, "When you flew with Bong, you never felt fear. His calmness made you calm. You believed you would survive because he was there." That was the real power of Richard Bong. He made others better simply by example. 8 decades later, his record still defines excellence. 40 confirmed victories. Not 40 guesses, not claims confirmed by witnesses, gun cameras, and reports. every one the result of calculated skill. Modern fighter pilots measure accuracy in terms of rounds fired per hit. Bong's numbers are staggering. On average, he fired fewer than 1/5 the ammunition of his peers per kill. His hit percentage was nearly triple that of the average pilot. To engineers and historians, this is data. To pilots, it is awe. They study his missions like chess games, each move deliberate, each shot a decision made in a fraction of a second. In training simulators today, instructors still use his combat footage to demonstrate the value of patience. The lesson has outlived the machine he flew. In the end, Richard Bong's story is about more than air combat. It is about how greatness is built from discipline rather than impulse. He started as a reckless young man who flew too low over a city and nearly ruined his career. He ended as the greatest ace America has ever produced. Between those 2 points lies a truth that reaches beyond the battlefield. Mastery begins with humility. He accepted correction instead of resisting it. He learned from mistakes instead of hiding them. He turned his own impatience into precision and his curiosity into understanding. That transformation from daring to disciplined is what made him extraordinary. When his general first punished him for his stunts, Bong did not argue. He said, "I wanted to see how it felt." The general replied, "Now learn to make others feel it." He did. The farm boy who once flew recklessly over San Francisco became the calmest pilot in the Pacific. In the skies where Bong once fought, the jungles of New Guinea have swallowed the remains of wrecked planes. The clouds drift quietly where once the air roared with gunfire, but the legacy of those battles lives on in every aircraft that takes off today. Every time a pilot lifts from the runway, climbs into the thin blue air, and steadies their hands on the controls, they touch the same truth. Richard Bong knew that flight is a conversation between man, machine, and mind. Technology may have changed, but the discipline that defines mastery has not. In that sense, Bong never truly left the sky. His spirit is still there, in every moment when precision overcomes chaos, when calm defeats fear, and when skill, not chance, decides the outcome. At the museum in Superior, beneath the restored P-38 Lightning, a small bronze plaque carries an inscription that captures everything he stood for. It reads, "He mastered the art of flight not for glory, but for duty. His calmness became courage. His precision became power. His example became legend." Visitors stand in silence before it. Some are pilots, others are children who dream of flying. The older ones often smile, remembering a time when the sky was a place of courage and discipline. The story of Major Richard Ira Bong endures because it speaks to something timeless, the belief that excellence is not noise or spectacle, but quiet mastery. The sound of his P-38 may have faded into history, but his lesson remains clear. True greatness does not come from daring alone. It comes from the patience to wait, the wisdom to learn, and the courage to act perfectly in the brief second when everything depends on you. Richard Bong lived those seconds better than anyone who ever flew. And though the sky has changed, his story still rises with every takeoff, a reminder that perfection in motion, once achieved, never truly dies.